Welcome back to another episode of Athena's Listening Crew, the podcast where we hold space for women entrepreneurs, both emotionally and physically. I'm Renee,
And I'm Lena.
and today we have a very special episode because for the first time, we are welcoming our first international guest to the crew. Yay! Amy Jones is a certified functional nutrition practitioner and certified ADHD life coach based in Toronto, Canada, and she works with clients across the globe. Her practice, Amy Jones Nutrition, blends functional nutrition with ADHD coaching to help neurodivergent adults, teens, and families build systems that actually work for the way their brains are wired.
Amy's path to this work is deeply personal. Her own ADHD diagnosis and her son's completely changed how she understood herself, her family, and the kind of support she wanted to create for others. With over 20 years in education as her foundation, she has built something truly unique. She will also be speaking at the annual International ADHD Conference 2026. And honestly, that tells you everything you need to know about the level of impact she is making in this space. We hope you enjoy this episode because, yes, she
She
did
did
that.
that. Welcome, Amy. I'm so glad to actually get you on today. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes. And for those, just so you know, like we met because you reached out to me from with my other business, The Body and Mind Strong, and I actually interviewed you on that podcast. And then getting to know your whole story, I was like, oh, we definitely have to have you on Athena's about your whole journey to entrepreneurship and all that good stuff. So excited. I know I'm still going to, even though I interviewed you once, I know I'm still going to learn more stuff this time. So
Yes, I'm really excited to be here too. And I love, we had such a great conversation as well. And there's so many pieces of that where I did want to launch into a bit of that entrepreneur side and what that journey has been like, because it does affect so much, especially in the work that I do. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
yeah, we actually had to keep cutting. We had to cut the time. Otherwise, I think we would have just
Mm.
kept on going talking because that was an awesome conversation. So, well, let's just jump into it right now. Like, tell us a little bit about, first of all, I know we already did the introduction, but tell us a little bit what you do and kind of how did your history getting into it? What led you to do that?
Yes. So obviously we know I'm a functional nutritionist. I'm an ADHD coach. I have a teaching degree. I was a teacher for almost 20 years before entirely changing my career and going back to school. Um, I think the catalyst for that was my own mental health and my own journey.
Mhm.
And then also my children's, obviously. So once I have two boys. The youngest was diagnosed with ASD and ADHD a few years ago now. And then that's what clued me into, wait a second, maybe this sounds a lot like me. And then that's kind of where I started to dig a little bit deeper. So I
Oh,
had
hang
this
on.
kind of turning point.
Yeah,
Sorry.
hang on one second. What's
Yeah.
ASD?
Oh, autism spectrum
Okay.
disorder.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Perfect.
And there's different levels of autism spectrum disorder. So he's a level one. For him, it's a lot of sort of social cues that sometimes he misses, or eye contact sometimes can be difficult, or being
Hmm.
put on the spot. So there's kind of that piece too. And there's this huge overlap between ASD and ADHD as well, that
Definitely.
we see often. And it's hard because yeah, it's definitely difficult when you're managing both of those things. So anyway, that's where I'm sort of coming at this with.
Hmm.
Um, and I went back to school initially, really because I started to see how eating regularly for myself, or eating in certain ways, or really focusing on thinking about food in a different way, approaching it differently, even with my kids, changed their behavior,
Hmm.
changed their ability to emotionally regulate. And then that's kind of where this business grew out of. And I started working in that way. Um, and it was definitely, when I started working as a functional nutritionist, it was all about the food. But then I realized that it's not just about food and the what, it's actually also about executive function. If you can't, we can know all the types of food and what we should be eating and all the shoulds around food.
Hmm.
But if we can't do the thing and actually eat it or do it or figure it out, I can give you a million meal plans, but if you can't do them, that's where things start to break down. And especially if you're neurodivergent, that piece is very difficult and really, I think, underappreciated in terms of the load that food, preparing meals, taking care of a family, or taking care of yourself actually puts on us. Like there's so many different demands, and we then think, oh, but what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. I'm terrible. Why can't I just, make this lovely meal and eat the healthy food, whatever that is? And then that's where a lot of that shame comes. And that's where I really started to dig in and again, went back to school because that's, loving learning a lot,
Mm-hmm.
to really figure a lot of this out and to support my clients, because I would work with them for a little bit and then I would never see them again because they felt guilt and shame because they couldn't stick to what we had talked about.
Yeah.
So what I do now is really different in terms of designing, systems for people to support them.
So what made you feel like you were ready? Like, when did you get the idea that, hey, I can have my own business?
I don't think I ever had that moment, to be honest with you. I think it was sort of, some of it was a little bit of like rebellion. So my sort of life journey, especially with mental health, anxiety and depression, lots of sort of, yeah, regulation issues in that sense. And I would get overwhelmed and burnt out so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just came to a head at one point where I was like, I can't keep doing this. I loved teaching. I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 6 years old, I remember.
Mm.
And I wanted to do that so wholeheartedly. And I loved it. I loved it. I love working with students. But it nearly killed me, literally. And I just knew I had to change, especially after having children, because I needed to be around for them and I needed to be, be able to be in this role as a mother and support them the way I wanted to. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it was more, I'm curious, I'm going to do this thing, especially when you have ADHD. We're kind of impulsive sometimes. So we make those
Yes.
decisions
I have
and
two
then we're like,
children with
oh,
it. Yeah.
yeah, oh, what am I doing again? What is this what I'm doing now? But it felt so right in my body, in my brain, in my heart, and my soul. And I was so excited to learn about it. And I think that's what I think the natural progression was just like, well, now I have this. So now I just want to help all the people. And the best way I can do that is through starting my own business. So I think that wasn't really a thought. Um, it was more like, this is just naturally what needs to happen for me.
Yeah. A progression. Because I think
Mhm.
I understand that because I think that's where mine has come from too. Because I was always raised to be like, okay, you get that corporate job with the pension, get something with the pension, and then you just push. And so me having my own business, that just never occurred to me. I never thought that was an option. And then when I started doing a few things on the side, I still did not look at it as like this could be my main gig. It was like I still
Mhm.
had to have that W-2 job. So I think for me too, it was a process. It took a while to build up to the point be like, oh, I can do this. This is something that I can actually do, and other people actually do this too. I didn't know this was a thing. Like, yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I that leap from especially being a teacher, right? And a
mm-hmm,
pension and that safety net. And again, it's like for you with the corporate job, that was the expectation on me too. Like, why would you ever leave
mm-hmm,
teaching position and give up all of that? And that's where I was like, well, I, that that's not for me. Like to me, it was such an easy decision because I was like, but if I need to stay alive, I have to do something differently here. So that was the non-negotiable for me. So I think that's where a lot of people don't understand that. And it's still a struggle. Like, oh, am I doing the right thing? But I know I am doing the right thing,
mm-hmm.
you know? Mm-hmm.
So with all this moving in, like you got the diagnosis, your son got the diagnosis, and then which is start helped you kind of see, well, wait a second, maybe I've always had the ADHD as well. I'm trying to figure out that connection to all three as you started going into it. How
Yeah.
did it feel like, how did it feel right? How did did you start noticing stuff in yourself and your children as you were moving into the nutrition world, as like basically, I guess, being your own experiment, so to speak?
Yeah, I love that, being your own experiment. That's exactly what it was like. Uh, and I think, through that process that we went through with my youngest for his ADHD diagnosis and then the autism as well, just listening to the questions, listening to, and looking at the reports and reading them. And I was like, my goodness, there's so many things that overlap between how he moves through the world and how I do.
Hmm.
And it was like a revelation, I think, for me. It was just, wow, like there are so many pieces here that I have been struggling with and shaming myself over. And, you know, being medicated for anxiety and depression and other things that it didn't get to the actual, it didn't speak to me in the same way. Like it just made me feel kind of helpless. Whereas as the ADHD and really looking at the ADHD or neurodivergent brain and how it's set up differently, how it's wired differently, how it
Hmm.
uses energy differently, gave me this like new perspective on, well, wait, if this is the way that my brain, essentially is organized, everyone's brain is different with ADHD, definitely. But, this gives me an idea, this gives me opportunity to experiment with things. I think that's what it really brought to me. And that's what I started to notice. But I think it's difficult, especially for women and girls, because especially when I was growing up, boys were only diagnosed with ADHD.
Hmm.
There was no way I could have ADHD, but I was that kid in the back of the room, my creative brain going off somewhere else. And I literally would be like, wait a second, what did the teacher just say for 45 minutes? Because my brain was somewhere else. And I wasn't jumping all over the place, right?
Hmm.
I was quietly being creative and contemplating and thinking and really, and even just looking at my own environment around me and sensing about what other people are feeling. Like I have all of these wonderful skills that I didn't know were actually really valuable. And they were so not valuable at that time in my life, where I was told they were not. And so when I get overwhelmed, I'm anxious, and yes, and anxiety is definitely part of this. I'm not saying it's not part of this. Um, but I think it's often we see this with women, the anxiety, the depression, the shame, the shutdown, the overwhelm, the burnout, all of those things, because we don't realize that if we can think about using our brain in a different way or shaping our environment to support the way our brain works, that actually can alleviate a lot of that stress. And we can actually be really creative and function in a totally different way than we thought we could. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned women because that's what I was going to ask. Because I did not know my children had ADHD, to be honest. I knew our son, he was tested for autism because that's the first thing that they thought because he didn't speak until 3. And he was showing some signs that at that time was they thought it was more on the autistic side, but then they tested him and they were like they determined not. And then it became executive dysfunction is what they called it in his grade school years because there were some odd behaviors. Um, and it wasn't bad. It was just the organization, it wasn't like he wasn't able to just be a normal student, I guess you can say. I think it's so conventional with the way these schools are set up. But my daughter, I didn't realize because she looked like how you described how you were like in the room and being creative, but being quiet. You probably look like an ideal student from externally. And then my daughter, and I just recently, she's trying to educate me on it, is it does look different in women. And so
Hmm.
if you can expound on it, like, um, and it's just always looked at like she was an anxious child and just nervous and depressed. Like she's gone through so many different diagnoses until ADHD and then things clicked for her as to what. So I'm really trying to learn because I don't have it, but I'm trying to learn through their eyes and through their experiences what that's like for them. And I feel sad that I didn't pick up on it when they were kids because they're adults, they're in their young 20s, but to like I'm glad it's surfaced. But yeah, I think it is under this huge umbrella, just like the autism spectrum seems to be as well. Can you give like some examples of what some of your experiences are like, the differences?
Yeah. And I think, I'm still, to be honest with you, working it out for myself. I think it's different for everyone because it has been this huge, very long journey of looking back at the way I move through the world and also looking at how I deal with things now. But before it was labeled as like the anxiety, the anxiousness, and how do we just help you not feel so anxious? And there was no like skills-based training or support around any of that when I was younger. It was just here, let's give you some anti-anxiety medication or put you on some sort of antidepressant
Right.
because hopefully that will bring down your intensity, right? Um, and really understanding that part of it for me was and is still a huge journey. So I think some of those things are some of the things I mentioned earlier too, in terms of we can be someone who's very creative. Maybe we're having our brain is going off in an area and then we come back and realize, oh my gosh, I just missed all this really important stuff. I didn't mean to, but I did. The other part of it is then I would feel horrible shame and have to work twice as hard just to catch up and try to figure out what I'd missed without letting anyone else know that I had done that. And so there's shame around this. And, I did really great in school. My marks were always great. I was A student all the way across, all the way through high
Yeah.
school, university, you name it. But the cost of that was enormous because it took me so much more time to figure out how to do all of the things I was supposed to do that were set out
Mhm.
either by teachers or other people because my brain didn't work in that way. So it's like I had to do like somersaults and everybody else was just walking down the street. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it was
That I
fine.
can see why it's such an energy, it
Yeah.
affects your energy level so
Yeah. So,
drastically.
and I think the experience for that is really different. I think there's a lot of women too who, like I've always loved movement. And so for me, I've always been very active. So I think I had a good way of managing some of this sort of intensity in terms of the energy or the frustration that can sometimes happen when like, why does this feel so hard? And some of that shame because it gave me that sense of power in my own body and gave me, just an understanding of how to manage some of this, anxiety and those types of things. So I think I was lucky in that way that that was something I love to do and I still love to do, but um, not everyone has that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that sense of overwhelm, I think, is something definitely to clue into. Um, and we don't necessarily pick it off right away, right? And I heard you say too that you feel bad because you maybe didn't see it when they were younger, but that's not up to you, right? That's not up to you. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. We're hard. Even with my own son too, I didn't see it. I had a teacher tell me that
Hmm.
potentially there could be something here. Like, so one of his teachers did, and I'm so grateful to her. And she really knows her stuff, let me tell you. But I didn't see it either, right?
Yeah.
And even in my older son too, I always think of it as a spectrum. Neurodiversity is a spectrum. So,
Hmm.
those titles, ADHD, ASD, I struggle with them
Hmm.
because I think we're all on this spectrum, on this line. If you think about it, we're just at different points. So there's certain
Right.
things that, my son can do, but my brain is just like, I don't even know. This is too hard for me or whatever
Hmm.
it might be. And then the opposite as well. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to say any one thing, but I think often we have to watch girls very closely to see,
Hmm.
especially if that anxiety is coming up. Um, People pleasing, right? Um,
Definitely.
Yes, because she got
Perfectionism.
misdiagnosed with depression.
Yes. And that depression, the anxiety is often an offshoot of
Right.
just not feeling like um, you can manage in the world. You're overwhelmed. You can't like you get to that point, and I got to that point many times where I was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't function. I don't know how to keep doing this. I'm exhausted. And it was depression to everyone. So then you're labeled with depression. And so then
Mm-hmm.
you sit and while I'm depressed and I have depression and I'm wallowing in this, when if we were to take that step back and really understand the depression is there, maybe the anxiety is there, maybe, I'm not saying for sure,
Hmm.
because the environment around you is making everything 40,000 times harder for you
Yeah.
than it
Yeah.
is for a lot of others. So, of course. And so let's look at how we can redesign your environment so that it doesn't feel so hard. And let's start learning what your brain needs. Like
Yeah.
that, like what a gift that is, right?
And I think like I've got 2 points to that. It's also, you know, if we may be looking at something and you may have noticed it, Lena, or Amy, you may have saw what was going on, but you just connected it to something else. Like me being an example, I didn't really have to study in school and I skated by with a B average. And I used to think when by the time I got to college, I struggled because I was like, oh, I just never learned to study. And then as I started breaking things down, it was like, oh, I'm ADD. Like I can't study like most people do. I have to either have classical music on the background. I have to change things up the way I read. I have to take notes as I read. Otherwise, I'm reading the same paragraph over and over again. And then so we just assume it's something else at first. And like the depression thing, that is huge because one thing I have noticed with my other practice is people with high anxiety, their side effects look like depression, but it's not depression. It's them being exhausted, like you said, Amy. It's that exhaustion from just running high that people think look like, say it's depression. No, it's just side effects. It looks like it, but it's not actually that. It's our body trying to recharge itself, recover, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I love that studying piece that just brought up for me too. Like I could never figure out, like I was always thinking, what is everyone else doing in terms of studying? Because I don't know how to study. Like I don't understand studying. Am I just supposed to
Hmm.
write words over and over? Like, and I think it took me a long time. And I think this is why teaching was actually it lended itself naturally to who I am as well, because there's talking involved. Because talking, especially for a lot of us with ADHD, is how we learn.
Hmm.
And I definitely am very auditory. I'm very visual. So I need those pieces. But at the same time, if I had to explain it, talk it out to someone, or talk out whatever a problem is, that is how I figure things out. If you keep it in your mind, it's not going anywhere. We need
Hmm.
to actively speak it often. And so once I've learned how to do that, and I started to recognize, like, wow, this is actually something really helpful. That's where like biochemistry, when I was doing my nutrition training, was much easier because I just was like, I just have to explain it to someone, and then it will help me understand it better, or help me figure out where I need to understand something better. So I think that's really important, that there are so many other ways, right, that we can approach things. I think studying is a good example of that.
Hmm.
Um, but that applies to everywhere, right? That applies to food and in the kitchen and like why something is hard, but we don't think about that necessarily as being something that we might need support around. We just feel shame, especially as women too, especially if we're the major, meal maker, I guess, in the household or whatever might be happening. So um yeah, it's I think it's a gift to understand this, but we also have to then start looking at what's going on, what's hard in our environment that we can shift to support our brains for sure.
So, how were you able to figure out to move? You got into functional nutrition for the ADHD. Like, how did you figure out what worked, what doesn't? You knew what didn't work. How did you come to that?
Oh, that's also a bit of a journey too. I think part of it is my again, my education background. I was always really curious about what how children learn. I worked with teenagers primarily, but how why something could be a little bit more difficult, or one child couldn't access, let's say, an assignment or something. And I was always really interested in trying to figure out how do we make sure that I can access this child, and sort of really sitting down and talking to that human about what's hard about this,
Hmm.
and how can we make it a little easier for you. I think that was a natural thing. But again, it was working as a functional nutritionist, giving everyone, the things I thought I was supposed to be doing, the meal plans, the whatever. Here, this is what your body, these are the nutrients that it looks like based on your symptoms you could be depleted in. And here you go, here's your thing, let's go. And nobody could do that. That's where I clued in. And then that's where it led me back to my coaching certification. But I think when I found, oh my gosh, this incredible mentor, his name is Jeff Copper. He's designed this paradigm around, it's called cognitive ergonomics. And it's really based around sort of taking an engineering lens to engineering your environment. And in terms of supporting for ADHD, for sure. And that, I think, was the missing piece for me. So it became sort of like something around the lines that, like, the problem here is not just, what should this person be eating? It was more about like, what's hard about doing the thing and eating those things, and what's hard about planning, or is it, is there something around grocery shopping? Is it like breakfast? Maybe it's the routine around that. Maybe dinner is really hard. Like, we're really cleanup is, I think, really underestimated too.
Yes.
Often we don't start things because we're like, I don't want to have to clean all of that. So
Yeah.
I think it's, there's that, his lens has really helped me make a lot of connections between the why can't we do this? And what's hard about this, and how do we build a system that it works for you? And that's kind of where, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I think that's where I come at things from. So especially working together, we definitely look at, what is the symptomatology? What are the symptoms around what you're feeling? And then using that as our baseline, as our guide for the hard work is actually what is hard about eating consistently. And some of the education around why that's important, especially for ADHDers and any sort of neurodivergence, making sure that we have consistent access to food and we are eating consistently, and why that's important for emotional regulation. So
Right.
that's really the work that I do now, is what is hard about actually doing this.
So that brings me to the question that we've been talking about nutrition, but what is, if someone's just coming in, someone is unfamiliar with what a functional nutritionist is, how would you describe what you do or what a functional nutritionist is?
Yeah. So, oh gosh, that's a big question. But so in terms of functional, that word, and this is different, I think, actually throughout the provinces in Canada, where I am in Toronto. So I'm in Ontario, but there are certain provinces where I can't call myself a nutritionist because that term only applies to a dietitian. So I'm not a dietitian.
Interesting. Okay.
And I'm not sure. And I think it's similar to in the States. I just don't know the details around that. But in terms of where I am right now, I initially trained as a holistic nutritionist, and then I did an additional certification in functional nutrition. So a nutritionist, if you go and see a nutritionist, nobody really knows what we do. So I actually, I'm appreciative of this question too. And we really look at definitely what you're eating without judgment. There's no judgment there. What you're eating, how often you're eating, looking at your eating patterns in general too. But then also really looking at symptomatology. So that's like, are you waking up in the middle of the night? Do you have, and what your medical history is as well? That's a big part of it too, like in terms of, where you've been on a journey, but also what might be hereditary from paternal or maternal sides of your family. And then we're looking at, what might be bothering you. Are you, and especially in terms of digestion, do you have, acid reflux? Do you feel bloated? How often do we talk about poop a lot? Nobody likes to talk about it. We talk about it a lot. It's really important. It's very telling, right? Poop tells a story.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big believer in looking at your poop. But anyway,
Yeah, totally. So we kind of go through all of that. And that's what I was doing initially. And then with the functional nutrition, the idea is that now, so I do a lot more testing. So I do something called nutrigenomic testing, which is genetic testing for nutrition in terms of what you could potentially struggle with absorbing properly. So something like, for example, B12. And I know because I have this too, but I see this a lot actually in terms of our neurodivergent population. I cannot absorb B12 well through my digestive system. And so I could be eating a beautiful, perfect, eating pattern. All the food I eat is wonderful. I'm getting all the vitamins and minerals and protein and all the things, right? But I'm still not going to absorb B12 well. So it's going to be a missing piece. And that often shows up for us. So, and that's really simple. I have like a little bottle on my desk and I take one B12 under my tongue every morning. It's sitting there reminding me. And it's directly absorbed into my bloodstream if I take it sublingually rather than, expecting to absorb it through my food, or if I take it, another supplement that I would have to go through my digestive system, I wouldn't be able to do it. So, and that's a genetic piece. So that type of testing is really important, I think. And we also look at gut testing. We also look at food sensitivities as well, because all of those things kind of lend itself to creating inflammation in our body, which is, our brain is part of our body, and inflammation in our brain affects our ability to function and use our executive function in that way. So the testing piece, I think, is the idea around the differentiation between functional nutrition and nutritionists. For us sort of here in Ontario and Toronto right now, kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah, because in the US, we have both nutritionists and dietitians, and the nutritionists are more like certification based, whereas the dietitians are degree based, and they're the only ones that can prescribe like meal plans. Like I, as a certified nutritionist, can't do that. I can't give out any kind of meal plans. I can give you suggestions of like, okay, these are the macros we're looking at, but I can't actually create a meal plan for someone. So there's with that level, but it kind of,
yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I have to be really careful with the nutrition side when I'm working with my clients, and they all want meal plans. I'm like, I can't do that. I can give you, plus I honestly don't think giving meal plans actually helps, because I've seen meal plans and I'm like, I'm picky eater. I'm like, I don't like that, that, and that. So I never learn anything from looking at meal plans. Whereas like with a nutritionist, I can be like, okay, here's these macros. What foods can you fit into this area? Or what do we want to look at? Do we want to cut back on certain foods and give suggestions? But like, yes. So, but it almost sounds like the functional nutrition, the functional piece is almost what we would refer to as more integrated, where you're integrating that medical piece, so to speak, of the testing, the blood work, more of the holistic, like let's look at everything around it. And you even talked about behavior earlier, which is, I would consider that integrated too, holistic, moving it into as a nutritionist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I actually just like stopped my subscription to a meal planning platform that I used to use. I'm like, why do I don't need this, because this is not what we're doing anymore. Not too long ago, because it's not necessarily helpful, especially with who I'm working with. It wouldn't help me. So why would I be doing that?
Yeah, and their access else, right? Of where they're at and what access to the food in their region and what's seasonal, what's not. There's the accessibility of it as well. And what can they get? You kind of have to look at their resources, what they have access to, I would imagine.
Yes, that's a huge one. And in my practice before, sort of, I evolved to this place where I am now, looking at, asking them, sending them a Google form, like, what's your favorite foods? What you normally like to eat? And how do we incorporate what you not like? What are your non-negotiables? And then kind of building around that. But that's great, sure, but they can't do it to begin with. So why are we spending so much time doing this when the actual problem is different than what we think it is, right?
I think what you guys do, as far as testing goes, I think it's huge. Baseline testing, I've always been confused with why we don't test more, like even just blood tests, all the testing that's available, to kind of have an understanding of where your body is sitting at right now before you start adding, these creating a treatment plan per se. I mean, just for lack of a better word, like a holistic plan for the person to kind of see where they're at. Because especially in your field, Amy, it's neurodivergent. It's a huge, like you said, it sounds like it's a more like you have to sit one-on-one with that person, because there is no catch-all. There is no like one size fits all. Definitely not in that field. Right.
Yes, absolutely. I think and you know what? I love that. My ADHD brain loves it, because, like, in terms of working with my clients, I've never built or supported them with systems or whatever it might be that is the same for any single human. It's always different. And because the way that they move through the world is not necessarily the same way I do. I can't give them the same plan or ideas or things. It's more about how me asking the right questions to help them start to understand what might be holding them back and help them develop awareness around, wow, this is no wonder this is hard for me. And it's okay that this is hard for me.
Yeah.
And let's figure out how do we, shift what might be happening in the environment or in our routine to support that. And that's really, that's what the work is really. But because of the fact that everyone is so different, right? But it's those little nuances, like it's not about the food. It is, but it's not. But it's about
Just a part
what's
of it.
happening
Yeah.
in the environment around them.
And I like how, like, bringing up the ADHD, and we've kind of talked about how before we knew what was going on, we kind of struggled with it. But like Lena and I, we have spoken to so many entrepreneurs that have ADHD, and I really think ADHD is our double-edged sword. Like before we knew how to manage it, it could take us out because it's that sharp. However, it's also our strength at the same time. And I think it really just once you especially when you wrangle it in, you really can excel with it. Like after our last conversation, you want to go back to school as well and get another degree. You've got this energy, this drive, and I think that's all part of it, which I think it serves you well.
Yeah.
Having it, even though it could be a struggle, it's serving you well.
And I
Yeah.
think that's where, we have to be careful because for me, I know, one of my strengths is and values is my love of learning. And that is really important to me, always to be doing that. That's what fuels me and lights me on fire and supports me to support others. Cause that's my, whole goal, right? As we all are doing in our own lives, supporting others is really important. But I do have to watch myself. I have to be careful and make sure, and I've taken a couple of steps back, even with thinking about going back to school. I actually just shifted my enrollment to the fall just because of the summer crazy stuff that goes on with my kids and camps and travel and all the things. I was like, why am I starting this now? This makes no sense. But because I'm so excited and I just want to jump in and I just want to go for it. I can't wait to learn. But I also have to remember to I need some time to allow myself to take that step back and really think about it and then not to be hard on myself about it too, because I'm not letting myself down in any way. I'm just shifting my enrollment to the fall instead of July when everything is really busy. So I think we have to watch that. But it's so beautiful that I get to I've been doing so much work learning about how my own brain works that I know that this is something that is really important to me, no matter what anybody says. And I can't wait to do it. That's so exciting. And, I don't think I would have done that had I not understood my brain in a different way than I do now in terms of ADHD and that diagnosis. And I think I had someone ask me the other day, like, why is this ADHD diagnosis such a big thing? And I think, just take a step back and really think like, I think it's a really big deal, especially for women who have been pretty much gaslit their whole lives, like me, that you have anxiety, you have depression. I've tried literally every medication on the planet. I've done every single treatment. I've done every single type of therapy there is out there. And none of it, like, great. It kind of like tempered it, but it tempered me, tempered who I am instead of giving me an opportunity to look at something in a different way and to look at my brain in a different way and look at my strengths, find my strengths. I didn't even know I had those. So, that's enormous for women, definitely. And I think those diagnoses sometimes are, because especially we're living in a very neurotypically designed world, that if we don't have that, then we're not recognized, let's say, in school. So when we go back to school, or if we go to university or whoever it is, we need this like piece of paper that says, I am going to need a different approach to learning. That's all it is. And I hate the term, and I'm hoping that we're all working really hard to try to change that. But it's really more about that. It's more about giving us license to access different approaches to life, and how we set up, how our environment is set up, and what we might need, and giving us power to ask for it without
Mm-hmm.
shame, without guilt. You know,
In your
yeah,
field, do you see it an increase in the neurodivergent community? More and more kids having it, or it's just coming to light and it's just always been there, and now it just seems like there's been a increase? Or what's your perspective? What do you see? What do you notice being in that?
yeah.
You're working.
I think there's, I mean, and this is just my opinion. Obviously, this is not like scientific hard proof evidence of anything. I think it definitely is awareness that has grown, um, and especially around, the female population. But definitely that awareness level has changed. I think those numbers in terms of how many people are, and children and adults, whoever it might be, who are being diagnosed with those things. And I think there's a lot of bias around, some people are like, oh, everybody is a little ADHD, and I want to scream and yell. And I'm like, no, this is not everybody has a little ADHD. No, that is just evidence of our society, especially with social media and short form video,
Mm-hmm.
training our our brain to need and expect, short pieces of, uh just, I don't know, I don't want to say dopamine hit because I don't really like that either, but I think it's that kind of thing. So I think there's like a cultural piece that has shifted,
Mm-hmm.
um in terms of how we move through the world, definitely because of social media. But there definitely is a lot more awareness around this, and really thinking about it. When you are diagnosed with ADHD or ADHD, or sorry, ASD, it is, or any sort of neurodivergence, it is because it has impeded your ability to function in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not all a little ADHD, okay? Because I've been there. I've been in the depths of despair and not been able to function.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we're talking about. We're not talking about
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, my attention span is shorter now or whatever. That's different.
Yeah.
So I think there is awareness around it, but we have to watch this because it is very frustrating for those of us who have been on journeys like mine and have really struggled to, and had to fight to get a diagnosis that they just kept, no, 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 you're just anxiety, you're just
Mm-hmm.
anxious and you're just depressed. I love it.
Or it's
Um,
social media, which I was
yeah,
told that. And I'm like, this started long before social media came around.
yeah.
And with the diagnosis, it's that no, not everyone has a little bit. It's about everyone has symptoms of something in the DSM. But just because you have symptoms of doesn't mean you actually have it. Like you can be anxious at times and not have anxiety. You can be sad at times and not have depression. And you can have some distraction, but doesn't mean you have ADHD. Or you can be a type A little bit higher energy, but that doesn't mean you're hyperactive. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of, and it's people just, they take just a few symptoms and they label it. And you're right. For it to be diagnosed, you have to have multiple, you have to like match like at least five of like how many of our symptoms they have. And one of them is how it impacts your function. And every single diagnosis has that one. You have to meet that one. And you hit it right on the head with that one.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's
So,
it's frustrating for sure.
hmm
Um, and I also think that DSM-5 is not, gosh, it doesn't recognize emotional dysregulation. That is not part of what it assesses, and this is where girls and women can fall under the radar
there is
because,
something coming out. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt
yes,
you, but
no, go ahead, go ahead. Thank
there
you.
is something coming out on that one, and I forgot what the term is, and they're starting to catch it, and it's
Mhm.
like a hypersensitivity, which it's not like being emotional. There is actually something, and I don't. It's not in the DSM-5 yet because they're just now starting to see it. They're like, wait a second, there's something going on here. Yeah.
Mhm.
So sorry, go ahead and finish
Yeah.
that.
No, and I'm going to look into that too because I didn't know that there was something about to come out. But I was talking with colleagues actually yesterday about this exact thing, that there was a point when they were restructuring the DSM-5, for ADHD, that they were going to put in this piece around emotional regulation. I don't know how it was meant to be presented or labeled or the language around it, but something. And then they pulled it out. They decided not to do that. So I think it's so complex, right? Emotional dysregulation and what that looks like, and what level, and how to quantify that, and how it affects ADHD. Like, I totally understand that. But I think, to be honest with you, I think ADHD primarily is about emotional dysregulation. I think that is the root of what we struggle with the most. And then all the other executive functions are affected. So if it's planning or prioritizing or whatever it might be, you can't do any of those without emotional regulation. That is the thing that we need to work on. And that's, I think, what the work that I do and what I've learned about this is, we have to figure out ways to restructure our environment to support our emotional regulation so that we can step in and do something hard. Or that might require us to emotionally dysregulate in order to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems like a really big word too. Like, because what does that look like?
Yeah.
And what does that look like in different stages of someone's life, the gender, and just from experience of watching my children, especially my daughter, get diagnosed this, then get diagnosed that, then they get diagnosed this, then they get diagnosed that. It's just like that in itself is insanity. I think would be kudos to you for really diving deep into that and making it your life mission. It seems like, turning into a business and helping so many. It's not just one person you're helping, it's an entire family, which I see that you is that what you also bring in families as your clients, as your patients as well? How does that look like?
Yes, definitely. So I've worked with actually a lot of moms like you, Lena, too, who have children who are not neurodivergent, but maybe they are not neurodivergent. And we know that ADHD and neurodivergence in general is really highly heritable, but there's often one parent in the family that is what we would classify as neurotypical. And I've worked with a lot of moms to support their children with neurodivergence, definitely, or teenagers. So, they recognize in their own child that child maybe has diagnosis, or maybe they don't even have a diagnosis. They're highly, suspecting it in terms of what that might look like, and then what kind of support might be available for them. And it's not an easy journey for them, definitely. But I think that's the idea here, is that the more we are talking about this, and the better that, someone like you said, like, you're just trying to understand what's going on here, and how to support them. Because often parents, especially if you're neurotypical, oh my gosh, there's so much shame and frustration on your part, like, because we're not sure how best to support them. And I'm not saying I'm any better equipped than you are to support my own son too, because I get dysregulated when he gets dysregulated. So it's just
Yeah,
kind of, sometimes it can be a mess.
because we all
So
co-regulate from each other. Yeah.
yeah, right. That co-regulation piece. But I just want to acknowledge that I think it's just, whenever someone like you comes to me, I'm just like, wow, you're amazing, because you want to understand and you want to support, and you're not just assuming that you might know what your child is experiencing and what is best for them, and you're reaching out and getting that education. I think that's so important. Yeah, I just am in awe of those parents. But I do work with parents, and then also adults, a lot of perimenopausal women, definitely, because often we start to see, and this is often when we start to realize, because our generation has been, I would say, in the 1900s, if you're born there, we have been underdiagnosed, or misdiagnosed with lots of different things, and we don't realize it until our hormones start to fluctuate a little bit more significantly later in life. And then that's where I see a lot of people, and they're not necessarily even diagnosed, they're just suspecting, especially if one of their children has been diagnosed too.
Yeah, and then also with perimenopause, like as we start to get older, our bodies have a harder time absorbing like certain nutrients as well. And having the test that you mentioned earlier is vital as well, because we just don't think of that. Like even protein. some women struggle to process protein after a certain age, like having a little bit harder with that. Um, so my next question is, you kind of talked about a little bit. So like, let's say if Lena would come to you and be like, I'm interested in your functional nutrition coaching, what would that kind of look like? What would that first appointment, the first conversation look like? What can she expect?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So, and just to clarify, so that Lena's coming to me to support one of her children or her family kind of thing.
What would you, Lena?
Yeah, let's go there. Let's make
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
real. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we would initially, I would send, I mean, it depends on the age. I know you mentioned your children are a little bit older. So there would definitely be some very un-neurodivergent friendly intake forms that we would have to fill out. I get so frustrated, and I've talked to, oh my gosh, I think all of the platforms that I use. So in terms of, the forms I send out to my clients, that helps me they help give me an idea of what imbalances might be happening in terms of body systems. So body systems like digestion, cardiovascular, so many different things. They hormone levels, stress response, so many different pieces. And so it kind of helps me highlight what we need to focus on first,
Right.
and how to start, and what's the first smallest step when we do things. But those forms are not neurodivergent friendly, so I always have to warn them. Often I sit with a client and do them in session with them if they are neurodivergent and they can't, or they need time and space to do that. Or I even do offer body doubling. So I'll just make an appointment with them. It's free, and we just sit. I'm working, they're working, they're literally going through the form. If they have questions, they can ask me. And we're just on Zoom. But so that's the kind of sort of approach that I take to this, because those forms are not friendly.
It's called body doubling. Okay.
Yeah, body doubling.
Okay.
Do
Never
you know
heard of
that
that.
term?
No, that's the first time
No?
I've heard something like that. I was like, body
Okay.
doubling. What are you doing?
I'm like,
Yeah,
that sounds fun. Okay, but
I
okay.
know. It's great. And
Okay.
I've done this many times. I've actually done it for clients where I'm in my kitchen making dinner or prepping something, and whatever it is, and they're on Zoom with me, and they're doing the same thing, but we're just together. And so we come on at the very beginning and we say, okay, this is what I'm planning. These are my goals for this hour that we're going to work together. This is what I'm thinking about. These are the questions I have, and they can interrupt at any time and say like, this didn't work out or whatever. And I'll be there to support them. And I'm doing my own thing anyway. So I don't ever charge anyone for this. So it doesn't bother me at all. It's supportive, and it helps me also stick to a task. And I think that's what the beauty of this is.
Oh,
Sometimes I will do 15-minute sessions where a client will I need to make all of my doctor's appointments, or I need to do something that's difficult, that if I don't, I need that accountability layer. And so it might be 15 minutes, and I'm working, they're on the phone calling their doctors or whatever it is they need to do. But it's that accountability piece where we often need, I know I need this. I need someone to body double me too. But this is the beauty of it too, is that we're supporting each other in that way. But that's a really helpful piece.
And with really quick with that, like I
Mm,
can definitely see someone with just ADD, like I can totally see how that helps, because I was in a continuing education course, and back in the day when they were like 8 hours, like all day long, which were mind numbing. Um, One time, the second half of the day, I actually sat in the back and I was crocheting underneath the table, and I was able to focus on everything that guy was saying on the second half because I had that kind of distraction piece. And I can see where that body doubling can also be kind of that little distraction. I don't want to call it a distraction because that's not what it is, but helps someone with like any kind of attention deficit to be able to focus more, because that was something that worked for me. Having that other
yeah.
piece helped me focus more. Okay. All right, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I love that. And I like that you used like even the crocheting thing, because the crocheting is actually your accountability partner.
Hmm.
Because you have to keep going with it, and you have to keep moving with it. And it helps you stay on task in that way. You don't have that opportunity to, especially when it's something that's hard. And you just brought back a lot of memories too. The amount of staff meetings I sat through where I was literally pacing at the back, or I'd get up and go to the washroom 8 times because it was just like, I need to do something. Usually it was movement related. I needed to move in order to listen, in order to take it in. But I think that's really important. And the idea behind this body doubling thing is it's this co-regulation. So we co-regulate together. We can support each other in that way to do something that's hard, that normally would take, an enormous amount of time just to, like, we call it booting up. Like, it's almost like when you boot up your computer, you need some time to get into a task. That alone is difficult for us to do on our own, but when we can do it with someone else, we don't necessarily always need that amount of boot up time, and we don't necessarily need the amount of time to do the actual task if we had somebody else there with us who was non-judgmental, who was doing something on their own. Like, there's no spotlight on you. It's not about you performing in a certain way. It's about let's just get this thing done that's hard together, right? And I think that's a huge thing, especially for ADHDers, when we are when we need to be engaged in a physical way often, or a verbal way or a visual way. This can be really supportive in that sense. And I think I've lost what I was talking about before now. So filling out the paperwork. So sometimes we'll do that kind of thing, in terms of support, because those forms are hard and they're extensive and they ask a lot of questions, but those give me those clues into understanding what might be going on in our bodies. And often there's a lot of very similar patterns. Everyone is different, obviously. But often I see, definitely with neurodivergence and ADHD, digestion issues. We're not digesting protein usually properly. So there's maybe bloating, there's other symptoms around that. In terms of gut support, in terms of blood glucose regulation, I think that's the biggest one. I think every single one of my clients has those issues. And that just means we there's a lot to it, but we are crashing, I think, at some point or multiple times a day in terms of our energy levels. So often we see this, especially in a later afternoon. Sometimes we see it, you're waking up at 1 or 2 a.m. every night. Yes, it can be linked to hormones, but 1000% it can also be linked to blood glucose. And that can be, we just look at those patterns. We look at where you get tired. We look at whether or not you're hungry. And what's happening with your eating pattern. So blood glucose is another big one. And then hormone levels. And that can be definitely, in my stage of life, I'm 48, the perimenopausal piece, postmenopausal piece is important because estrogen is so linked to dopamine transmission in our brain and consistent dopamine. And this is why we often realize, wait a second, these things are more intense now because things are inconsistent in terms of hormone production and how we use them. But also, I think the stress hormone piece is really important too. So that can really mess with our blood sugar and our hormones. And so this is what I often see. So we start by looking at a lot of those things that we might see there. And then for Lena, for you, so I would say, here, these are these forms, either your daughter can fill them out or your son or whoever it is, and then they, or you can fill them out. So if it's for someone who's younger, the parent will fill those forms out based on what they know, their history, the patterns that they witnessed with their child. And then we start there. And then the next piece would be, let's map a week of depending on the age again. So it could be your family's life, or your child's life. So for you too, especially if your daughter is, at the age she's at, we'd have to look specifically at what her routine looks like for us to understand that. But say for a younger family, it would be like, what does a week look like in your family's life? And then we break down the day after that in terms of when do we wake up? When do we eat? When do we do all the things? And then that is what helps me start to see, okay, I look for definitely eating patterns. I'm looking for consistent eating, opportunities for that. And I'm also looking for stress levels. I'm also looking for how can we support you with maybe smaller shifts in your environment to make things easier. So if you're coming home and you're exhausted at the end of the day because you had a full work day and you're just like, I don't even know what to make for dinner and whatever else. And then we end up ordering out, which is we actually build in takeout to the plan. and
Oh,
without shame.
lovely.
Yeah. So like, because that's like, my goodness, that's what it's for,
I'm
right?
sorry,
Like, and we're
I
allowed
am not the
to.
person to slave in the kitchen.
It's
I'm
Yeah.
just gonna put it out there right now.
Yeah.
and it's being
Yeah.
realistic too, because
Yeah.
it's
And we
yeah.
do a million things a day, and yes, so it sounds exhausting when you're like, "What's for dinner?"
Yeah. Nobody likes that. When everybody asks that question to me, I just want to scream and yell, and I try not to, but
My
sometimes I do
eyes roll
because I'm
real
like,
quick.
why? Yeah. So I think and then it's really looking at, and the reason we're, deconstructing what a week looks like or what a day looks like is so that where can we put opportunities to either make sure that there's the nourishment that you need in your fridge or in your pantry or in your kitchen, but also maybe we need to restructure, like I call it kitchen architecture. Like sometimes we don't do an overhaul all in one day, but we might, like, I don't know, let's look at a cupboard. So if coffee in the morning is what you do, let's put all of the things you need in one place. Like we restructure instead of thinking about, some of the traditional ways that we have been told to set up our kitchen. Dishes are here, blah, blah, blah is there. Spices are in this cupboard. Why don't we just put everything that we actually need in one place and we
Hmm.
open? It reduces something we call toggling, like this back and forth between different cupboards or the pantry or whatever else. All of those things require decisions, require brain
Yeah, it can be
power.
too organized, right?
Yes, right?
That's
There's
what I
no
figured
such
with
thing.
my son. I was like, the most simple way, son, is like your way. Don't worry about organization. I had to kind of help redesign his apartment where it's the most simplest thing for him. Not all these crazy
Mm-hmm.
baskets and this, that, and the other. It just, so I'm sorry. Yeah. So I totally am
Yeah.
understanding what you're saying here.
Because I
Yeah, no, and I love that. I'd love to hear more about that too, because that's exactly what I'm talking about is I, half of the work that I think that I do with parents, especially if they're neurotypical, is break down some of the conventions that we think we need to have around either preparing food, making food, what we should be feeding our kids, especially, my goodness, with ADHD and ASD, especially too, is like food preferences. There are some children who will eat 3 different types of foods and that's it. And even
Yeah.
just breaking that down and helping them understand that's okay. These
Hmm.
are safe foods.
Yeah.
And there are other ways that we can approach expanding palate and development. But like with ASD and ADHD, that palate doesn't, it develops a bit slower than everyone else's. So they might have texture preferences or hate certain things. And
Right.
some of that education can be really freeing for a mom who's, exhausted and just feels like she's failing
Yeah.
because her child won't eat whatever. And it's okay. They don't actually need as much protein as we think they do. It's more about, let's make sure they're eating consistently. Like, I don't even care at that point what it is. Let's just look at consistent eating. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
You're really lifting the veil off of parent shaming.
Yes.
Hmm.
I'm trying. I still shame myself sometimes and I try to catch myself in it too, but I think it's so ingrained in us.
Yeah. We're
It's
so
hard.
conditioned at it. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Um,
the interesting when both of you guys just brought up the organization piece. I actually had a client with ADHD learn how to restructure her refrigerator to have the condiments not in the door. Like here in the US, all the condiments are in the door. She took that out and put her fruits and vegetables in the door because she's like, that made sense to her. So it's figuring out what makes sense to you instead of where it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Mm. I love
So,
that. And I do that too. Like I hate drawers in the refrigerator because that's where like vegetables and fruit go to die, according to
yeah, you
me.
forget about
Anyway,
them. I don't know. I don't have, I'm not, but I forget about them in there.
yeah. And so often I'll have people just take out the drawers. Like we don't even need those. And let's put, or if they want to keep them, then I love that idea too, Renee, is that we take all the condiments, we put them in the drawers because we don't need to see those. We need to see the food that's going to go bad
Yeah.
mhm.
first. And I think that lends itself so beautifully to this neurodivergent perspective. We have to see it because our working memory struggles to remember what we bought 3 days ago because that's the way our brain is supposed to be designed. It's not a bad thing. It's just we need to rethink how we set up our fridge. So whatever is at eye line needs to be, what we should be eating first, because it's going to go bad. So if it's like a pear that is, on its last legs, it's got to be right in front of you. Oh yeah, I'll eat that. So that's what you see when you open the door, not ketchup and other things. That's not helpful, right? Or leftovers from the other night in a clear container so that we can see it. And we're like, oh yeah, I've got this, easy. We're reducing decision load, right? We're reducing the amount of work and effort our poor brains who have struggled all day already to just do the things in the world. Let's just find ways to reduce, right? And to give them a little bit of a break. And who cares if your kitchen looks, you open a cupboard and you're like, what is this? Nobody's going to care. It's for you, right?
It's interesting that you also brought up eyeline, like what's in line of sight is I'm diving into, and I just was hearing how like emotional eating is broken down, because what we think is emotional eating very seldom is emotional eating. There's other components to it. And one of it is line of sight. Like we come home, if it's like something we see, then we're like, okay, we're craving that. So I'm tired. So I must be emotional eating kind of thing. Whereas no, it's because it's the line of sight. So if you put those other things in the line of sight, they'll be more amped to grab those first, like you were saying. So something I'm just diving more into, learning more about the behaviors around like your foods and stuff, so forth.
Yeah. And I think the word that came to mind is accessibility. I use that. That's kind of the framework I use in the work I do, is this idea of accessible nourishment. So, and I had this problem this morning. I was like, I'm so hungry right now, but I have to go and do this thing. And I opened my fridge and I was like, dang it, I don't have anything that's easy and quick right now. And this happens to all of us. So it doesn't matter what system you build, it's always going to happen. And not being hard on myself about it, but at the same time, that's the idea, is how can we build a system for you that sets you up so that when you do open your fridge or your pantry, like whatever is at eye line is easy, accessible, ready to go. You don't have to do a million steps. You don't have to, cook it or whatever it is. It's already ready to go. And thinking about it as assembling meals or whatever it might be for you and your family, rather than like, we have to cook this. This is a big production, and then there's all these dishes, and then there's other things, right? So I think that's the idea that we're trying to, that I'm always looking towards, like, how can we do that for you? And then where do we build that in? So it's not prepping 6 hours on a Sunday. It is, if you're already in the kitchen doing something, you're standing waiting for your coffee, let's wash some raspberries and stick them back in the fridge at eye line, and then they're easy and ready to go. Or something like that, right?
Because it's this efficiency that you're also like putting into practice that I'm hearing is how can it be more efficient? Because energy is important. It sounds like because you work so hard throughout the day, trying to do things, and then energy efficiency, it seems to be a huge part of it as well that you're incorporating in the practice and training us.
Yes. And I think that's where, especially working with, let's say, a mom like you, Lena, it would be recognizing this, because, and I had this moment with my son last week, like, and it's his birthday the last couple of weeks, and he becomes quite dysregulated because there's so much excitement or anticipation and unknown. And so he doesn't even know why he's dysregulated. But then I realized at one point, I was like, oh my gosh, he didn't have access to food throughout the day because there was, I can't remember what it was, some sort of event at the school. So he's used to going to school. He has a little snack box, like a little bento box, and he opens it up, and we've had to get special permission for this, but these are part of his accommodations. And so he eats all day, and he just regularly, is nourishing himself. He knows. But he didn't have access to that. And then there was a later meltdown later on the evening, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what this is. Like this child just needs like something, anything. But we don't often see behavior like that as a fuel or energy, a lack of energy or a lack of consistent fuel throughout the day. We often see it as like, here we are again doing the same thing with this behavior, right? We label it as something like that
Yeah, like it's
instead.
a problematic
Yeah.
behavior. Like they did
Yeah.
something bad or wrong or they're
Mhm.
misbehaving. And
Mhm.
now they look back on it and you're educating all of us on this. It's just like, no, it's not. It's because they missed that thing that
Mhm.
that needed to nourish them, whether it's in their body, emotionally, all of it, the whole body.
Mhm.
And when that's missing, yes, this is what happens. That's the end result. It's not, they're not trying to be bad at all. It's just
And
they
I
didn't get the
No.
thing that they needed to help regulate them.
And I'm
Yeah,
glad you brought that up because I actually wanted to bring that up as we're talking because when we first met and I learned this and I'm at fault for doing the same thing when I talk to you because when someone is like, okay, my child has ADHD, it's a nutritionist, we know foods can impact our mood. All right, tell me what kind of foods to change. And that's where my mind went when I first met you as well, where I was thinking this is what we were going to get when we did our interview because when I first started integrated behavior health, I was given a sheet of like foods that help and hinder with like depression and anxiety. So my mind in our current state, we're like, we want that quick fix. Tell me what to change. And you've already proven so far through this whole interview that it's not a one thing, one step deal. It's what's going on, what are you eating, what are you digesting, what are you absorbing, what are your behaviors? And you brought up your son before is if you learn it's with him is you learn he can't eat just like the standard 3 times a day or 4 times a day. He's got to be able to snack through the day. So I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted you to talk about that and how you had to
Yeah.
learn that and how to advocate that we had to go outside the standard norms of what society was telling us, where how and not what, but how we're supposed to eat.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's just such a huge misconception. I think behavior with our children, especially with ADHD or ASD, is data. To me, it's
Hmm.
always data. It is information. There is a need that is not being met here. What is it? And gosh, I wish I could tell you that I was able to do that every time it happened and regulate and think about it so calmly in that way I just said it, which is not true because I also struggle with all of this stuff too. So I think that's what I strive to do. Is it food? Is it, my gosh, you didn't have a good sleep last night? Is it, as I said, it was his birthday. Like he is dysregulated for that. Is there something else going on here? What need is not being met here?
Hmm.
For this child. And when we start to think about all of this through that lens, it becomes just, gosh, I think it lifts such a weight off of us, especially if you are a mom of a neurotypical mom of neurodivergent kids. It can help lift some of that weight, right? This is a message they're sending, and sometimes they don't know how to send it, or they don't even know why they're dysregulated. And it's not necessarily up to us to figure it out, but we can look for, did you eat regularly? What was your sleep like? Are you dehydrated? There's so many biological pieces to it. But I think that's really important just to be thinking about. And then now I forget your question again.
It was just really to bring up how, as a nutritionist, it's not always about you tell me what I need to eat. First, we
Yeah.
got to find out what's going on. So, also having that expectation that we've got to start when someone comes to see you, you're going to start looking at all these different areas to help. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not this one quick fix, it's let's look at the whole puzzle and put everything together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's really hard for a lot of us too, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
parents, a lot of people, anyone in general, because we don't often associate, you know, what we're eating with our routine or daily routine, or we think about meal plans, or we should be eating clean, whatever that means. A doctor of a client of mine recently said, you need to eat clean and lose weight. And I just laughed, and we both laughed. Like, what does that even
Oh,
mean? That was the advice.
if I could give $1 for every time I heard that, I would be
Gosh.
like on a beach chilling, not working
Yeah,
ever. But
I'd be right beside you. Yep.
so I love that practice because you seem to the information gathering is the really important piece that you do with your clients right off the bat is like getting as much information as possible and the support that you provide, that if the forms itself is overwhelming, you're doing, body doubling. That's another thing I haven't heard.
We kind of wanted to jump a little bit. We've talked about like what to expect as a nutrition, like as a client coming to you. What other kind of programs do you have to offer, or resources, opportunities?
Yeah. Yeah, so I work definitely a lot one-to-one with my clients too. I do have something called WTFs for dinner. Um, okay.
WTF.
Yes. Okay.
Which
So
I
I
love
do
that name,
have,
by the way.
yeah,
I know my eyeballs went right to it when I looked up your website. I was like,
yeah. WTFs for dinner. Uh, I'm not going to say the F part, but it
Yeah.
is what the heck's for dinner, essentially. But it is that question where we're standing in the kitchen and everybody's like, what is for dinner? And you just want to explode. But it's a series of, I want to say it's almost like, if you think of it as like podcast videos, but it's shorter videos around um, strategies, ideas, things that I have built with my clients over the years that have supported them. It's not necessarily the right way to do things, but for example, someone who hates cleanup, there is a video called Cleanup Compression, and I just sent it to a client of mine the other day. When we're walking through your day, and this is a big deal, so you often don't start things because you're thinking about the fact that you don't have to clean up a million dishes, right? So finding ways to really understand that, and this series, this system is really just offering some different ways to think about how we approach what we do in the kitchen and how we approach meals in that sense. So it's not like it's a meal planning anything. There's no such thing as that. It's really about how can we think differently. Yeah, so there's that. And I do have a resource called What to Do When Food Feels Like Too Much, because I think that is something that we share. A lot of us can share and understand. And there's a discount code in there for my WTF system as well. But I think it's really helpful because it goes through capacity. It helps us to look at and recognize where we are at that specific time of day. And if I'm a level one, or I call it door one sometimes, is I can't do anything. My day just went totally in a different direction. Nothing turned out the way I wanted. I need to make sure that I plan for that day. That's what we do. We plan for the worst day, not the best day. And then we think about, okay, level two or door two, maybe I can do a little bit more. Maybe I can do a little bit more than just assembling. Maybe I can cook something here, but then I add something else to it. And then door three would be, for me, it's when I have more time, or say, for example, on a weekend, if the pace is slower and I'm not stressed out, I'm not rushing my kids somewhere. And because I love to cook, but it's hard. We're busy as entrepreneurs, right? So I always try to find at least one door three or one level three moment in a week if I can. Sometimes it doesn't happen, where I get to enjoy it and be slow, and I get to look at making something, or look at a new recipe, or whatever it might be. So I think that resource is really helpful. I think that's the biggest piece, that a lot of women are like, wow, I never thought of it that way. But instead of feeling the guilt and the shame, but this is the capacity I'm at right now, and this is what I'm doing, and I have a plan for it, which is really helpful. So yeah, so you can look for those things on my website, amyjonesnutrition.com. And I think Instagram is a good way to contact me too, if you want to DM me there. Again, at Amy Jones Nutrition, just to get in touch or to inquire a little bit more. I'd be happy to answer any questions or talk anything out with anyone.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, because I've been following you on Instagram too, and you've got some good information on there. So it's definitely worth checking out. So, all right. We have one final question we like to ask everyone who comes on, is, if with everything that you've gone through as an entrepreneur, as a woman, what would you tell your younger self at the beginning of this whole journey?
I would say to her, you're not behind. Your struggle is definitely a real struggle, but there's so much strength in it. And the path you have ahead of you is winding. It's a winding one, right? I think it's that winding path is what led me to do the work that lights me up, that brings me joy, but that also has such an impact on others, which is always what I've always wanted to do, was to support others,
Mm-hmm.
that calling. And without that winding path and all of the things that I've been through, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today. And I think that's really important, but it's hard to see that when we're younger, right?
Definitely.
Can I sneak in one question? I'm so sorry we lied.
Mhm.
Because how you beautifully said what you would tell your younger self. And we see that you just had a proposal accepted for the International ADHD Conference of 2026. So congratulations. What
Thank
does
you.
that moment mean to you, especially given how personal this work is?
Yeah, oh my gosh. I'm trying to hold back a little bit of a wobbly voice and some tears here, because it is enormous, and
Yeah, it's huge.
it is not something like, if you had told me when I was, 10 or 11 years old, that girl who just, her whole life's purpose was to become a teacher and to do everything she could just to do those things, to get there, to get that goal, to achieve that goal. And then that I would be speaking at this conference where literally my major mentors and inspiration in this community that I, eat, sleep, breathe in, I never would have believed you. And I think that is, oh my gosh, I think it's a true testament that to this idea of, we're on this journey. It's a journey, and we don't know where we're going to go. And when we fall down, or when I had those moments of I couldn't even function, there's something else on the other end, right? And we don't know where it's going to lead us. And it's important to listen and trust our own selves, not what everybody else is saying,
Yeah.
and follow our own path in that way, but we don't even know what that is half the time, right? I didn't know. I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's like the winding path.
Absolutely.
It's not like these detours. Like, it's
Hmm.
actually the work that I needed to do to
Hmm.
get here, and to get this, to have this understanding of who I am, my children are, the people I work with, but then also to have that work recognized at the level that it's going to be, and it is now. That is mind blowing, right? But that, if I need to do that work. That hardship was the work, right?
Beautifully said. Well, Amy, you have a seat at the table. It sounds like you're at the head of the table. So congratulations on all
Yeah.
your accomplishments.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Congratulations. It's
much, and thank
great.
you for, yeah, giving all of us a voice in this, and giving us a platform to discuss this and to talk about it, and to normalize what we're doing, and normalize how important it is to do the kind of work we're doing as entrepreneurs, and to step out, and to try something, and not be afraid to try
Mm-hmm.
something hard. So I'm so appreciative and in awe of the work that both of you do as well. So thank you.
And you are our very first guest that resides outside of the United States.
You're
So
our
thank
first
you.
international guest.
Yay.
That's big for us. So thanks, Amy.
Which is awesome. Yeah, I am so glad you came on. And I'm like, even though I interviewed you before when we did that, was it last month? I still learned something new today. So I'm so glad you did, like, you gave us the chance to talk to you again and hear everything that you're doing. So it's been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So,
You're
all
helping
right.
so many families. It's just not even the individual that's dealing with ADHD or neurodivergence. It's the entire family system. That is humongous. So I
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And I think that's where, like, the beauty of this is it's, yes, the source of it came out of, ADHD or neurodivergence and mental health, but I think for all women, we need to support each other, to take some of the shame away, especially around food and meal preparation and all the things. Like, there's all, like, those systems can all of these things can actually help everyone. It's not just about neurodivergence. I think, gosh, I wish somebody had told me this, you know, earlier on. It's great now, but it's also like, please, I wish I could have had that a long time ago, and my own
Mm-hmm.
mother too, my own mother also, that pressure so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you again. And we'll definitely have all Amy's information in the show notes. So thank you again, especially for all those who are tuning in, who keep tuning in and listening to us. We really appreciate that. And unless anyone has any questions, I think we're good to wrap it up. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.